Welcome to Biztech's Enterprise Technology Show, the show where we feature tech companies and their leaders across Asia talking about their businesses and solutions and how they make the difference. Now, today our conversation is with Sandeep Sharma, President of Asia at Workday, a leading provider of enterprise cloud applications for finance, HR, and planning. Now, it was founded in 2005. Now, Sandeep, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Brian. Thanks for having me on.
Now, Sandeep, let's start the conversation by you giving us an overview of Workday and its interesting history.
Well, the overview of Workday is very straightforward. We are the backbone for high metabolic organizations. And that's actually a term very easy to understand. If I was to ask you, Brian, which is the most important bone in your body?
And I would, from a bone-wise, I would say my spine.
Spine, right? And it's also referred to as the backbone. Now, yes. Guess what happens when you have a weak backbone? If you have backache, I mean, many of us have over the years had some instances of backache. We can't get up, we can't walk properly, we can't bend. Forget about running. Now, a strong backbone is what powers high metabolic organizations. If you want to run fast, you want to have a strong backbone, and that's where Workday comes in. And for a company, there are three things which are very important: people, the resources, money, and customers. You can't get to customers if you don't have people and money. And so what Workday does is we put that strong backbone in place for organizations to manage their people and money. And with that strong foundation, high metabolic organizations can run really fast to acquire customers and deliver superior, outstanding customer service. So that in a nutshell is to think about Workday. We are that backbone for high metabolic organizations. We've got a very interesting history, as you just pointed out in your remarks. We were started in 2005. Our founders of the company, really, really impressive folks. The company was formed because PeopleSoft was acquired by Oracle, and that takeover had its own set of interesting nuances. And so the founders came out and they started Workday a couple of years later. And I think that was really the genesis of what the founders wanted to do, to create an enterprise which was born in the cloud. And it didn't have some of the issues that the technology that they had built before had. They wanted this high metabolic organization capability to be delivered, born in the cloud, something where historically everything was delivered on-prem.
Yeah, and it was a client-server environment. It was a completely different world. And one of the things, looking back at the time that was started, Workday is essentially one of the first companies that basically was built for the cloud before even the term the cloud was coined. We used to call it in those days on-demand services, if I remember correctly.
Absolutely. And I mean, cloud used to be like, and so, yeah, it literally was something which was very, very nascent. The entire notion of a CIO who sees stuff in a data center on-prem, he can feel the equipment, he feels what he or she's bought. And now all of a sudden, everything is up in the cloud. So it was a major leap of faith. And Workday was one of the first companies to kind of take that leap of faith for mission critical systems, the backbone of organizations, powering their HR and finance, right? So to let those systems move to the cloud was a phenomenal leap of faith, which some of our early adopter customers, the visionaries, you have this cycle of how you first have the leaders who are kind of saying, okay, I'm going to take things on. Then you have the followers who are kind of saying, okay, I'm more comfortable with moving to the cloud. And I think right now it's more mainstream. If you're not in the cloud already, you're way late, right?
And I think, Sandeep, the whole accelerator for adoption of the cloud has been this pandemic.
Well, I mean, it has accelerated, but the fact of the matter, Brian, really, the acceleration to the cloud was already there before. I mean, for the last 16 years, we have seen so many customers already move. The more than 9,000 customers we have today is a reflection of the fact that the cloud transition started some time ago. But obviously, the acceleration, as you point out, has been dramatic. Just imagine, business is just completely shut down. You can't go to your offices. What do you do?
Yeah.
Right? And so all of a sudden, if you have employees who are virtual, teams who are virtual, outcomes that you have to deliver by teams which are completely virtual, customers you're meeting are virtual. How do you collaborate? How do you bring data together? How do you bring analytics together? And this is what implies the notion of agility. If you don't have that agility, which is powered by fundamentally a common data architecture, which is pulling together your data, your processes, and delivered from the cloud, right? So you can juice up and down based on where you need that capacity. If you want to shut a country down because things are completely different, you want to juice up a different country, you're doing M&A activity, we have seen that pick up over the last few months, right? M&A has gone through the roof. Now, how do you do all of that when you can't even meet the people you're acquiring?
Absolutely.
How do you bring systems and processes together?
And I think one of the things that happened is this: you actually are new at your job. You started at Workday in April. And from what I understand from my research, you were remotely onboarded. Tell us about that.
I was totally remotely onboarded, and it was just such a intimidating and an exciting experience, right? Historically, whenever you join a new company, you want to be in the office the first day, you're meeting your team, you're traveling around the region. I've done all of that. For me, my first day was completely virtual. But I tell you, the best onboarding experience I've had in my working career has been at Workday.
Why?
Everything. Workday runs on Workday. Workday is a high metabolic organization. And so right from the first day, the laptop showing up, my business cards in place, everything, not just for me, for anyone, any workmate who's onboarding, the experience is second to none. And you know what? Employee engagement, it starts not just from my onboarding experience. It actually started when I was interacting with the leaders, trying to decide if Workday was the right place for me to join or not. And I think the entire experience from there, which reflects the culture, because you've not joined the company yet, so you can't experience the systems. You're just experiencing the leaders, the leadership principles, and the culture. That just kind of was really super exciting for me. And coming on board, I experienced that day one. The systems are just glued on. And just imagine, Brian, the day I start, I have a journey assigned to me as an executive as to what the first 12 months should look like for me. And the systems put me on this journey. I have a couple of other journeys assigned to me because of the role that I'm in. And the system is guiding me through that process. And everything that I'm expecting, artificial intelligence and machine learning is surfacing things based on the role that I'm in, people that I need to connect to, skills that I need, capabilities I need to develop, relationships that I need to form, right? Historically, this is all kind of, where is the coffee machine? Where do I go talk to someone, figure out all of that? No. Right? So in today's environment, though I was intimidated by the fact that I was being onboarded remotely, what made it absolutely delightful, and it just left that engagement taste in my mouth, which to this day, I speak about it with so much passion, is the fact that it's the best onboarding experience I've had.
And you know, Sandeep, this is something that for you as a leader across the region, you have to continue to do this because this new norm is basically hybrid workplaces. So they're going to be working at home, they're going to be in the office. That whole employee engagement program and the glue that glues you as an employer, and to build customer loyalty, recruitment, retention, and so forth, that's all going to be an overall internal customer experience.
Absolutely. And Brian, we talk about this all the time. You look at statistics coming out of the US. Employee disengagement costs the US $500 billion a year. That's not a small sum of money.
Yes.
In fact, even Workday's own studies, some of our own studies that we do, because we have the ability of looking at data, we have it at scale across our 55 million accounts that we're managing globally, human capital accounts that we're managing globally. So you can think about this, that across that, we get a sense that the engagement scores demonstrate to us that about 25% of the workforce, their engagement scores is such that they are at the risk of leaving. 25%.
That's a significant number.
Yeah. And I mean, this actually bears correlation to what we read in the newspapers also nowadays about the great resignation.
Yeah.
And how do you kind of retain talent? And if you are able to retain talent, you can engage them more, you can develop their career, and that is how you actually start the journey, not just on day one, but along the way as well.
Now, business is booming in the tech sector. Workday is no exception. And as you've just pointed out, the fact that you are already engineered to function amid all this chaos has really held companies like y'all in good state. You have the tools to then deploy to your customers. What's the strategy for the region? And as you said, what is your journey in terms of a leader for the next 12, 24 months?
I tell you, Brian, there is a ton of growth coming. We had a great Q2, delighted with more than 50% of Fortune 500 companies using Workday at the moment. We have set our aspirations to become a $10 billion global enterprise in terms of revenue. We are at about $4.5 billion at the moment. Now, just imagine that level of growth over the next 3 years is going to mean that even the Asia Pacific region, the Asia region is going to see that growth.
Where is that coming from at Workday, particularly for you, since your responsibility is Asia Pacific? Which sectors, industries have you seen the strongest adoption for your solutions?
Professional services, high tech, FSI, financials, and insurance. These are very, very high. Healthcare, education, all of these industries are growing rapidly. You're based in Malaysia at the moment. And while I give you some of these more usual suspect like industries, Sime Darby, take an example of Sime Darby, spread across multiple countries, 20,000 employees, multiple industries, something as diverse as plantation to automobiles.
Yes.
Think about that, right? I mean, how do you even transform these industries? And everywhere, the issue is the same. They've all been impacted in a very dramatic manner. The fundamental starting point has changed. Uncertainty is the norm. What has worked in the past is irrelevant. The leaders today have to play by a new set of rules. They have to play by a new set of rules. So even in industries which have not, well, let me put it this way, industries which have thought that they transformed before, but they were literally, like you mentioned, this lift and shift to the cloud. That is not transformation.
Yeah.
Right? Or if you say, listen, I'm going to transform a piece at a time.
That's evolution.
It's not evolution, it's Frankenstein. It's a monster. And so the choices that you have in front of you is, am I bold enough to say that things which have not worked for the last 40, 50, 60 years, am I bold enough to take a different approach to how I solve the problem? Leaders have to play by a different set of rules. They cannot do the same thing and expect a different outcome.
And one of the key things is also, I think, the challenge for especially large conglomerates, large entities in the Asia Pacific region, is the fact that they have legacy systems which have been working very well, especially some organizations I'm sure that you've encountered where they're still running on mainframe systems and old software that never breaks down. So how do you then convince them? And why should I, as a CIO, if I'm sitting in a large conglomerate, everything is working fine, I'm ticking the boxes, I built some middleware applications, I put some stuff on to make on top of my legacy systems, everything runs fine. Why should I go to somebody like a Workday and do the disruption?
It's a great question, Brian, and I'll answer that on two different dimensions. The first dimension is risk, right? The second dimension is that business is going on as usual. Now, if you're in an industry which has not seen the tectonic shifts, I haven't the foggiest idea what business you're in. Every business out there has been impacted. Some significantly positively and some significantly negatively. But there's not a single business which is working the same way as it was before. In this environment of disruptive change, the status quo is not an option. So that's on the part of everything is going the way it was already. We fundamentally challenge that because our customer conversation that we are having don't support the philosophy that everything is working the same way as it was, because it isn't. Now, the part which is more important is risk appetite. Well, do I really want to change? Given all of this stuff which is happening around me, should I just double down with what I've already got? It's been working for the last 40 years. And should I just double down on this and just ride it out? Right? And I mean, you said you were on Money FM and I gave the example there. It's like taking the first car which was invented, the Model T, and racing in a Formula One race. Your competition is running on technology which is built for the now, here, and the future. And you're running on technology which is 20, 30 years old. So my question would be to you is you're actually taking on more risk by not, so you are taking risk either way, but by doing what you are today, you're taking on more risk relative to moving to what's going to run you at a higher metabolic rate. If you continue running at the same pace and the world around you is running so fast that you run the risk of becoming obsolete, you tell me which of these two options, stay as you are or transform, which one has more risk in it?
Now, Sandeep, I'm going to ask you then, I'm wearing a different hat. Chairman of a board or CEO, my CIO is basically pushing us to transform. We are ready to make the investment. However, we want to do it in stages. What are my priorities? What is the checklist that we should look at in order to move the needle quicker?
I mean, if the priorities can be sliced and diced a variety of different ways, but the first thing is about the boldness of what you're setting out to do. So doing a piecemeal transformation, saying, listen, I want to transform HR, for example. Let's just take HR as an example. But let me just transform learning. Because everyone's remote, I want to give them a tool, let me give them some learning opportunity so that they can learn while they are remote. But let me give them shitty technology, pardon my French, for everything else. Right? How they actually submit expense reports, how do they reskill themselves, how they do everything else is completely bad. It's not going to work. And it's not a bold move. Right? So as you're looking at strategies for what makes sense for you to do, and you want to prioritize, there are priorities that can be established by, say, for example, countries, if you're a multi-country operation. Right? There are priorities like, for example, Workday helps transform human capital and finance. You can decide, okay, let me start with finance. Or if you have an issue on the planning side or the analytics side, you can start with that. Employee engagement, right? So you can choose business areas to take a bold move in. But the thing that you cannot do is put band-aids. That's the thing that you have to avoid.
And I think, alluding to my question earlier as well, the band-aids are building applications on top of middleware, on top of old applications.
Yeah, gone is the world of custom software, right? I mean, you have to elevate human performance. What do I mean by elevating human performance? And how do you elevate human performance? You have to automate. You have to get rid of custom developed software, configure, and you have to bring extreme agility. How do you do that? So can your business leaders themselves configure rather than relying on IT? If you have done that, you have changed the cycle of where a business leader has to write a requirement document, has to send it to IT. IT gives a quote back. This is what it's going to take. This is how long it's going to take. That entire process, the work is not even started yet. You're 3 months into the negotiation process of when the project should start, right? Now that's the historical cycle time. And by the time it's actually delivered, you might be 18 months out. As opposed to the business leader saying, there's a new vaccination guideline which has just come up. let me just go mark this up, or look, if someone else in the community has done it, let me just adopt it. And what used to take 18 months is down to 3 days, and done by the business leader, no involvement of IT. Now that's what's called a fundamental shift in cycle time and metabolic rate. A fundamental shift. It can only be done if your backbone is strong. You're on a bandaged backbone where you've got multiple things you're driven into your spine. There is no way, taking a few steps is impossible. Forget about running a race.
Now, Sandeep, I want to zoom in on you right now. And thanks for your insights. You've been a tech leader for almost 3 decades. What are some of the key things that have served as your true north?
That's a deep question. There are a few things that come to my mind as I think through true north. The first one is values. You have to identify a set of values that you can stay true to, and they don't deviate based on circumstance. And that was actually one of the reasons why I ended up joining Workday also, because it believes so strongly in its core values. 2 of the most important core values at Workday are employee first culture, which I've experienced firsthand from the day that I joined. I mentioned the onboarding experience, and to our customer first experience. And that's why we get to 97% customer satisfaction. So having those core values, and I think that's kind of served very high to me. Another value which within Workday is very important is integrity, right? I mean, you cannot do away with integrity, fun, right? So you can identify a core set of values. That's actually been very important for me. Being an authentic leader, so not kind of trying to hide your emotions or how you feel. Being human has been important and has served as a true north. And I think on the business side, I've always looked up to doing extraordinary things. So just a normal running business which does not require exponential growth or is looking to get the extraordinary outcomes that you aspire for. My style of leadership is aspiring for the extraordinary, both in terms of business outcomes as well as teams, as well as human team members that we are dealing with.
On the flip side of the equation, what are 3 things throughout your career that you've learned that perhaps you would have done differently now that you have that years of wisdom behind you?
Well, the first thing is join Workday a lot sooner.
Okay, that's really a plug. That's a shameless plug. Okay.
Plug. I mean, it's a great company. I don't know why I didn't join them earlier. I should have been the first part of the set of employees which entered the company. My career is divided 15 years odd in the US and 15 odd years in Asia Pacific, and the 3 decades that you identified, kind of a clean slate in the middle. I think if at all, one thing I could have done differently, probably moved to Asia a lot sooner. Because I did benefit from when I moved. There was just a lot of change going on. The telco industry was kind of deregulating at that time. There were a lot of licenses being awarded, and I participated in that growth. But I think I could have done a lot more to learn from a much more diverse culture than the US, which was just a unified kind of an environment. So I think I could have done that a little earlier. I spent a lot of time in engineering and product management very early part of my life. I could have probably transitioned to business management a little earlier.
It's been a fascinating conversation, but any final thoughts you'd like to leave us with before we conclude this very interesting interview?
I've really enjoyed the talk, Brian. I mean, I think the change around us, and as we were talking at the beginning of the conversation, the change around us is tectonic. It's impacting us in so many different ways, and not just on the professional side, but on the personal level as well. Relationships, parents, families, not able to meet. You have not met your parents, even though they are in Malaysia, just a different Malaysia, you can't meet them. And I think there's a final thought in my mind with the audience, it's to have that empathy, to have that authenticity in the engagement with our workmates, with our teams around us, because I think everyone's going through a really tough time at the moment. And our relationships, both on the professional side and the personal side, require an extraordinary amount of attention. Despite everything else which is going on, I think that's what's going to survive as we come out on the other side.
Sandeep, thank you very much for taking the time to be on the show.
I've appreciated the opportunity, Brian, and I look forward to talking to you again.
Likewise, I'm Brian Fernandez, and I've been speaking to Sandeep Sharma, President of Asia at Workday, on Biztech's Enterprise Technology Show. This video will be on our various platforms, as well as our website, www.biztech.asia. Please like and subscribe. Thank you very much for tuning in.